Money won't buy happiness, but poor stewardship of money will steal happiness. R. Nelson Nash. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. We are here for installation 21. This is going to be episode 21 from our book review on Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. We're still in part 5. This is covering an even distribution of age classes. Nash does start this particular chapter, and we'll be looking at pages 71 through 74. He starts this chapter with a reference in Proverbs. It's Proverbs 13, verse 22, first part of it, where it says, "A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children." And we'll get to another one here in a second at the end of the chapter. But an even distribution of age classes is visually described from Nash's forestry background. So a part of Nash's background as a forester comes into play here, where he is describing what it would look like to take a parcel of land, to partition off different segments, and to be growing, culling, cultivating, and then processing segments of this property one at a time. So he puts it to a number, and what he's describing is planting, making some cullings along the way, bringing an ultimate yield to fruition, to harvest, and do it in a way to have a constant flow of some are being planted, some of these segments are being planted, some of these segments are being culled, and that produces some income, and then other segments are being cleared for the ultimate harvest, and there's a constant cycle of this. So there's a planned out timeline here. He's saying, as a forester, he learned to think 70 years into the future. So if we're taking 40 years, for example, right here, and saying, well, if we take this big piece of land and we cut it up into 40 different segments, and we're constantly moving from one to the next to enact this process to create an even distribution of age classes amongst trees. And he's just trying to begin relating that visual and that science and that plan and that approach to what we can do with creating a private family banking system, where we have this long-range view, we're capitalizing, we're having some access to liquid capital along the way, and there will be this ultimate yield, and that, of course, embodies the death benefit from a policy being paid out into the family system that's been created along the way to be able to create this self-sustaining system moving forward. It's really neat hearing his background. And again, if I pointed out some things that I wrote down in my notes that I noticed, he points us to recognizing that there's a significant amount of time that goes into this. And I know that when I speak with folks, we can get impatient for different reasons, general impatience, or we're so excited about this that we're ready to implement this concept. And that's a good kind. That's a good kind. But also, Nash's number one principle is to think long range. Remember, get impatient as we'll get. We're going to be here for the whole rest of our lives. We don't know how long it's going to be. For some it's longer, some it's shorter. But we're going to be here for all of it. So why not think long range? Why not think over our lifetime and then keep walking that out? Think about our children's lifetime and then think about our grandchildren's lifetime. Remember the proverb we just read, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. In fact, just today, I had a wonderful conversation with a lady from Alabama who had gotten in my schedule. She'd read Becoming Your Own Banker. She was rereading it, which is great and so very appropriate for us doing this book review right now. And we began having a conversation where she's telling me about her vision of beginning, and she's a grandmother, about how she's envisioning buying land as a family, building a family compound, having gardens, having a family cemetery. That's not everyone would even think to mention that. She did. So neat to have this capacity to host, because they're very family oriented. And I love that, to be able to host the extended family get-togethers because of having that space and facilities and these types of things. It was a beautiful conversation. So she was definitely thinking ahead, and we were having conversations about what it could look like for them to get started and lining up phone calls and Zoom calls for the whole family to be able to get through a video presentation and the book and us to have a conversation about their questions. And it was just a beautiful conversation. I'm looking forward to our next one for sure. She was thinking long range. She was beginning to think about, what would it look like for us to put in policies on grandchildren, etc. So that's going to play right into this next scenario. So I'm encouraging you, get back. If you've never read Becoming Your Own Banker, read the book. If you've read Becoming Your Own Banker like I have, I'm telling you, I find new levels of understanding every time that I read the book. So use that forestry example as a good visual to consider what it looks like in a business, because that's what forestry is a business, and that's a good way to look at infinite banking and building a private family banking system. Treat it like a business. Look at it like a business. That's a great way to go about doing that. Use that as a helpful visual, and just understand that applying those principles, recognizing that, yes, significant time is going to go into that. If we're going to build a significant system, okay, so recognizing that significant time goes into building something significant like a banking system, which Nash points out in that first section here on page 71. A private family banking system will be vastly more profitable than the example that he's giving with forestry, which can be very profitable, of course. But banking is the most profitable business that one could be in. Banking for a household, banking for a current business that you already have, banking for a business that you're considering in the future, banking for investments that you make. Everything's financed. Be in the business of financing whatever it is that you are doing or are going to do. It's the most profitable thing that you could choose to do. That's right from Nash. Now, there's an example of grandparents. And again, this is where this lady from Alabama that was speaking with me today was. She was saying, well, shouldn't we be starting policies on grandchildren? My husband and I are older, and everybody should start where it's appropriate for them. I personally believe, and I communicated this to this lady, that leading by example is a great thing to do. More is going to be caught than taught with this concept, as well as many other things. So leading by example, by getting policies on yourself, would serve more than one purpose. You, as a leader in your family, are leading by example, showing I'm getting policies on myself. I'm using these policies to be the banker in my own life, and I'm demonstrating that. I'm living that out for my family. Great. Also, and I'm getting ahead of myself perhaps, but if you have policies on yourself and you do have children and grandchildren already, then when you graduate, when you pass, there's going to be a tax-free windfall to those generations below you. So it behooves you, of course, to get protection on yourself, to have an adequate death benefit on yourself, again, primarily for the purpose of being your own banker during your lifetime, but it will culminate in a tax-free windfall to the next generation. So if you start with yourself, lead by example, and a system is built out into these next generations, then there's going to be a place for that death benefit to be able to go. So tax-free dollars can enter a tax-free accessible system below you in these other generations. And again, I am getting ahead of myself, but it's going to create a self-sufficient system from there on. But let's look at Nash's example. Grandparents getting policies on grandchildren. There are lots of benefits to starting policies on the next generation. It's a way to cover, and Nash enumerates these, it's a way to cover multiple generations, and it also promotes long-range thinking, like we were just discussing. It minimizes the paperwork and the underwriting for whole life insurance policies. For example, typically, a minor is not going to have a medical exam like an adult would, and some of the advantages, of course, are, and heaven forbid, we never want this to be the case, but if some health issue develops on a child, but they already had a policy on them before, That doesn't change. That contract is already in force. It is not subject to health changes in the future. If it's a whole life policy that's been properly structured with a mutual company that pays dividends, that's an asset that's already owned. It's already in force. So it's great to be able to have policies on younger individuals sooner rather than later. No question about that. It does account for a tax-free buildup of cash values intergenerationally. Again, one being able to access tax-free capital for the banking in your own life, but then facilitating that tax-free windfall to the next generation. It's a beautiful thing. By starting policies on children too, and this came into my conversation today, children typically are going to be able to, and again, there are nuances here, slightly different, but typically you could say that children can be insured for half of what parents are, which inherently means that their premiums will be smaller. So it is easier to start policies on children or grandchildren where inherently the premiums are going to be smaller than, say, on their adult counterparts. Also, the generation, and it could be parents or grandparents. I'm a parent and I have policies that we pay on our children because our children don't pay their own policy premiums. We do currently, and we have young children. But what I'm saying is that typically parents and for sure grandparents can be financially in a position to be able to pay premiums. So they're the most likely to be able to pay premiums on the grandchildren, which is a great boon for those that are thinking intergenerationally. And by enacting this family banking system, you're building up, and I'm going to use this phrase. I picked this up from a good friend of mine, Miss Robin Washington, your financial fortress. I heard her say that the other day. You're building up a financial fortress where you're not going to be inherently reliant upon the government or Social Security programs, etc. You are accounting for the banking function in your life, and by accounting for the banking function in your life, and by implementing infinite banking with these kinds of policies, it grows the death benefit. It grows the cash value of these policies. You build out a system over your lifetimes. It makes you less reliant on government programs. And when I say less reliant on government programs, I'm speaking about passive income, being able to access tax-free capital in your passive income years. And we did cover passive income or retirement in episode 18 of our book review. So feel free to check that if you've missed that. We did address retirement or passive income in that particular episode 18 of the book review. But having passive income assured, it's a guarantee. It's a guarantee that you have contractual access to compounding capital tax-free. And it's a big point to remember, too, that when that windfall occurs, that someone in the family graduates and there is a tax-free windfall to next generation beneficiaries, heirs, however that's set up, that really helps in simplifying a transfer of assets and estate planning purposes, because it's just a check. It's just tax-free money to the beneficiaries. And when there are other assets that are exchanging hands, and in whatever way that looks like, this isn't advice, but I'm saying that a check from an insurance company goes a long way towards providing liquidity to be able to split things up how you would want, to where things don't necessarily have to be sold, to be able to facilitate what it is that the owner had desired in their estate planning. It's just a check. It's money, and you can do with it what you want. And then the last two qualities that we see is that, again, this implementation of infinite banking, it promotes a money mindset. It promotes a money mindset to where we're not just owning these policies, but we're using these policies. There's a process that's occurring here. We bank as a family. We don't just own the bank, but we bank. Banking is a process. Banking is a verb too. It exists. It's a process. So that occurs, and it can be in a way of stewardship. being good stewards with capital during your lifetime, because you know that it's going to culminate in a tax-free transfer to the next generation who has been prepared mentally to grow and to scale and to perpetuate that into the future. So what this example of the grandparents getting policies on the children and teaching this concept brings to bear is a system and pointing out the process that should be taught from generation to generation. And again, that the individuals that are buying these policies and paying for these policies are leading by example themselves. A perpetual motion is created. It's profitable and it's certain. This is, again, I don't think we can overstate the benefits of creating this guaranteed, this certain system. And each generation is able to fund policies on the infant. And again, that is important. You can get policies on 2-week-olds. When those babies are 2 weeks old, you can get policies on them. And if you continue to learn more about who Nash was and how he went about things, I mean, when he had a daughter getting married, that husband was getting a policy on himself and paying for a policy. And when children were born into his family, grandchildren were born into his family, they were getting policies on those grandchildren. So that is very important to understand. The sooner the better, for sure, of course. Every situation is different, but the sooner we can get these policies on infants, and again, I've already told you that I think you should start with you. My personal story is that I got a policy on myself. Then yes, we did get a policy on my wife. Then yes, we did get a policy on each of our children, and we continued to grow and to scale that after that too. But getting policies on infant grandchildren is a huge thing to point out. Remembering that dividends can eventually pay for a policy premium. See, by getting policies on children while they're young, it does take less of an outlay to be able to do that. And regardless of whether it's policies on children, policies can get to where the dividends can pay for the ongoing premium. So nothing even has to come out of pocket. That policy has gotten to a self-sufficient state where its own dividends can be paying for its ongoing premiums, and it, again, can be providing passive income later in life, facilitating a transfer of wealth to the next generation, all of it. So the death benefit and the cash value continue to grow. And one more point about parents being insured is an important thing, because I do have conversations with, I've got clients in underwriting right now to where they're the grandparent and they are wanting to do this very thing. They are wanting to get policies on grandchildren, these whole life policies that are structured for banking, so that they can put capital in those policies and access those policies for banking in their lifetime while they own the policies, growing and compounding, paying extra premiums, all the things that are going to be optimal for these policies, so that they can eventually transfer that asset to grandchildren. But sometimes the parent doesn't already have insurance. Now, it could be insurance from work, it could be insurance from the military, it could be insurance that a parent has, but to get policies on grandchildren, policies need to be enforced on parents. So whatever policies, and there's strategy that comes into play here. And again, every situation is different. It may behoove an individual to get whole life insurance policies right out of the gate on parents so that more policies can be gotten on grandchildren. Also, it may be the case that you get convertible term insurance. So you get insurance that does give you the contractual right to convert from term policies to whole life insurance policies structured this way, but it allows you to pay term insurance type prices now on the parent, and that would cost less. That would be a lower premium than whole life premiums right out of the gate on the parent, so that you could get whole life insurance policies on the grandchildren. And then as you implement this process more and more, it may be the case, of course, that you follow through on that while funding policies on the grandchildren, using that, maybe paying off debts, doing things in your business, however it is that you want to use capital. You get the snakes and dragons out of your life, like Nash would say, And by having that convertible term policy on the parent, you are guaranteeing into the future the opportunity to be able to convert that policy into another whole life policy to add and to grow and to scale your system. And one of the benefits of having a convertible term policy on any individual, and again, this might be different in different ways, although you can't get convertible term insurance on children, you typically are going to have a permanent style of policy on children. So that's why I'm describing the process, this scenario that way. But you don't have to, when you have a convertible policy on someone, you don't have to subject yourself to a health exam in the future. That's another one of the benefits. And so I hope that that's helpful, me just describing what I know to be helpful in some situations, because I have clients that are doing that very thing right now. Grandparent getting convertible term policy on a child so that she can get whole life policies on the grandchildren, knowing that we'll be able to convert this other policy into the future into a whole life policy as well and grow and expand that system, because the grandparent already has insurance on them as well. So again, those bullet points from 72, if I shared my notes with you, this idea of creating an even distribution of age classes in a private banking system allows multiple generations to be covered and think long range. You have to think long range to think about covering multiple generations. And just think about the opposite. Do most families think intergenerationally? And since they don't, what are their results? Doesn't every generation typically have to start from scratch? I know we did. And we had lots of help. Don't get me wrong. We had lots of help. Great people, great family helping us. But my wife and I started from scratch. But it doesn't have to be that way if we implement this intergenerational concept of being your own banker. The underwriting issues are minimized when you're insuring infants. There's a tax-free compounding on the growth of capital generationally. The outlay does pale in comparison to the windfalls that are guaranteed to come. The premium paying generation is the most capable. One death benefit creates a self-sustaining system. Social Security or any other related entity or lack thereof, because Social Security is not promised to be around, not guaranteed to be around, is rendered insignificant. We can be certain of passive income. Estate planning is exponentially improved and simplified. The process of becoming your own banker transfers as a mindset from generation to generation. It's not just about buying a thing and owning a thing. It's about implementing this process, having this financial independence and autonomy as a family philosophy, and it promotes stewardship. For me, I appreciate private property as an American, as someone who appreciates the Constitution for what it is in protecting our liberties, to include private property. There is another document that says the good Lord owns it all. So I want to promote this idea of being your own banker for the purpose of being a good steward of what we've been given as a family as well, personally. And this is a good place to repeat what Nash says here at the end, or close to the end of page 72, when he said, money won't buy happiness, but poor stewardship of money will steal happiness. Building financial independence and autonomy for yourself is a beautiful thing. Implementing that in a way that impacts the next generation and the next. I mean, can you think 8 generations into the future with me? That is optimal stewardship. Now, I'll say this about pages 73 and 74. As with the other installments in our book review series, I really don't take a deep look at the illustrations. Remember that Nash has said that if he were to rewrite the book now, which he's already graduated, but if He said this when he was still alive, that if he were to rewrite the book knowing what he knows now, he would have left out the illustrations because it's the concepts that matter. And I'll quote again James Nethery, who says, when you understand the concepts, the details don't matter. And when you don't understand the concepts, the details don't matter. So it's understanding these concepts that makes the difference. The fact that you can become your own banker. So I'm not going to belabor looking through those illustrations, even though there are things that we can learn from them. No question about it. Now, the closing verse that Nash shares with us is Proverbs 27, verse 23 through 24. If you care to read that with me, it says, "Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds, for riches are not forever. And doth the crown endure to every generation?" And that's a question mark. I love this passage. I thought about this passage earlier, forgetting that Nash actually had this in the book on this page. It is important to be diligent in continuing to fight off the human problems, in implementing these principles of thinking long range, not being afraid to capitalize, being an honest banker, not doing business with banks, rethinking our thinking, build a place for windfalls. These principles that we've picked up for Nash, they don't just happen by accident. We've got to be diligent to know the state of things and to look well to it. And then also remember this: riches are not forever. We can teach to the best of our ability. We can lead by example to the best of our ability, and we should. We can encourage and promote everything that I've been sharing here. But that's a question right there at the end of 24. It says, "Doth the crown endure to every generation?" You know, what I can say is, as for me and my house, we are our own bankers. We don't know what the future holds for us. The future is unknown. But my encouragement to you is that you consider these points from Nash. It is a worthwhile endeavor to become your own banker. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a worthwhile endeavor. It gives you control. It gives you the profitability over the banking function in your life. Furthermore, everything that it can do for the next generations is so worthwhile. So this is probably one of my favorite sections in the book because it causes me to think about legacy and me and my wife and our children and looking ahead and what we do and are still doing with our extended family. Everything that was in that conversation that I said that I had with this wonderful lady from Alabama this morning, where we're talking about what we want to do with our children, what we want to do with our grandchildren, what we would like to do to create a lasting impact, have that American dream for ourselves of family land and family gardens and family business, family investing, family banking, family cemetery, family gatherings, facilitate, get-togethers to where we're spending time together with each other, creating peak memories and living out an independence together. And that certainly is going to include finances. So this has been a wonderful conversation for me. I would love to hear from you. Please, if you've had a great takeaway from this particular conversation, put it down in the comment section below. If you have yet to be introduced to this whole idea of what it means to become your own banker, then check out a presentation on my website. And if you're ready to have a conversation about what it could look like for you to implement the infinite banking concept, then you can find me at durhamtalents.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. Look forward to our next conversation. I hope you have a great day. Live and leave a lasting legacy. Take care.